Hey guys, Dark Skeleton here, and we're back for another 3 Blackrock Mountain adventure cards. So first up we have a 3 mana 2/4, which is arguably average stats. It's a mage creature where after you cast a spell, you deal 2 damage randomly, split across all enemies. The card effect text on this card should make you immediately think of the Goblin Blast Mage, where whenever you played the Goblin Blast Mage and had a mech on the field, it would deal 4 damage randomly split across all enemies. Now, it's no secret that in every Tempo Mech Mage deck that the Goblin Blast Mage is played for its card effect, in addition to having pretty much average stats at 5/4 for 4 mana. However, what makes that card so good is that it only requires you to have a mech on the field. Since mech decks always have a mech creature in their hand or on the field, it's very easy to play a Goblin Blast Mage and get its effect. For 1 less mana, you get the ability to deal half of the damage, but as many times as you'd like. So if you play a Flamewaker and then drop, say, an Arcane Missiles or a Unstable Portal, you can get that 2 damage out, and if the Flamewaker stays on the field without being silenced, you can do it again. Since it benefits from playing a lot of low mana cost spells, it's sort of like having an Antonidas in your deck, but probably nowhere near as good. 2 damage when you play a spell is sort of like having 2 spell damage for some cards, and sort of like having less than 1 spell damage for other cards like a AoE Arcane Explosion or a Flame Strike. Then of course you also have to remember that the random damage is not going to always hit the target you want, and sometimes it'll hit your opponent's face, which you usually don't want either. When you compare it to the Suit Spewer, which was a 3 mana 3/3 mech released in Goblins vs. Gnomes, and know how that card was basically never played in any real decks ever. I saw it maybe once or twice, but never at the better ranks. Then you go back to looking at this guy, and really, it's not all that much better, if even as good. So, is Flamewaker going to really be played and constructed? I don't know about that one. I think that if this is played in decks, it's going to be like 1 out of 100. The only kind of deck I could really see it working in at all would be like a hyper-aggressive mage deck that runs Mana Worms and uses Arcane Missiles not only for the Mana Worms, but also for Flamewaker. But honestly, 2 random damage split across enemies isn't that big of a deal, so it's really going to take a unique kind of deck to run this. Next up we have the Core Rager, which is a 4 mana 4/4 beast for hunters that has the battle cry, if you have an empty hand, gain +3/+3. Now, that sounds pretty good in theory, getting a 7/7 out for 4 mana under certain conditions, but then you can also look at the Druid of the Fang, which was released in GVG for Druids, where whenever you have a beast on the field, which I would consider an easier condition than an empty hand, then that 4/4 for 5 becomes a 7/7 for 5. Now, that's not to say this card is bad. Getting a 7/7 for 4 mana is really good, and then you can also factor in the fact it's a beast, so you can play it with some beast synergy cards as well. But it's got its own share of problems. First off, if you're going to run this in an aggressive deck, which you pretty much need to have an empty hand reliably, then you somehow have to justify putting this into a Face Hunter deck, which currently doesn't run anything more than 3 mana. With Face Hunter and other aggressive decks, it's a real problem to try to include such situational cards in your hand, because they tend to just sit around for a long time if you draw into them too early. Secondly, if you play this as a 7/7 against a control deck, it opens you up to being countered by a BGH, which many late game decks are going to be running anyway, though they wouldn't really need it against you. But if Core Rager became a card that was popular, people would just start keeping the BGHs in their hand until you played it. Now, if there was to be some kind of strange new deck type where you play a hunter that intentionally tries to empty his hand as much as possible, possibly for the sake of comboing with Jeeves or some other cards they'll add in the future, then maybe Core Rager could be pretty good in a deck like that. That style of play does exist in other TCG games, so it's not out of the question for them to eventually add it into Hearthstone as well. However, right now I'm not sure it fits many hunter decks that are on the market. Maybe there could be some kind of alternate beast deck or a mid-range hunter deck that could run this guy. But even then, I think it would be a tough fit, and you'd probably only want to run one of these, because if you have 2 in the hand, then you're guaranteed to have to play 1 as just a 4/4. Next up we have the Imp Gang Boss. This is a 2/4 for 3 mana, and it should immediately remind you of the Imp Master from the vanilla set. Whenever this minion takes damage, it summons a 1/1 Imp, which is different than the Imp Master, where at the end of every single turn, the Imp Master takes 1 damage and you get a 1/1 Imp on the field. Because so many cards have been added to the game since then, Imp Master really isn't played at all anymore, unless you're talking about Arena. But I think that the Imp Gang Boss is a little bit better than that. The Imp Gang Boss is less likely to reach its full potential in terms of the number of Imps it summons than an Imp Master, but this card is almost guaranteed to get something out of it, because if you remove this card in any manner that doesn't involve killing it outright, destroying it, or silencing it first, then you're going to get a 1/1 Imp on the field. Possibly 2. And you have to remember, 4 health is kind of tough to remove at around turn 3 or turn 4 unless you want to spend some really big removal like a Fireball or a Swipe, and you don't want to use that on just this. Although having your stats spread across a bunch of minions isn't usually as good as having one really solid minion like a 3/5 instead of a 2/4 and a 1/1, the Imp Gang Boss fulfills 2 purposes in my mind. One is to be a really sticky minion. It's hard to remove it, it's hard to remove all of it when you factor in the Imps, and it's got 4 health, which is pretty solid for a 3-drop. Secondly, it gives you a lot of minions, and for zoo decks, especially ones that run Sea Giants, that's a really good thing. It's one of the reasons that the Implosion is such a strong card, because it gets you so many dudes on the field, even if they're just 1/1 Imps. So overall, even though Imp Gang Boss might not be an overpowered card, I do think it's one people are going to be running quite a bit as soon as the new set comes out. But it's definitely a zoo card that may also be run in some demon decks. So I've been Dark Skeleton. If you want to see me cover more of the cards as they come out, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.